The emergency lights bathed the council chamber in harsh white light as representatives from 47 species filed into their designated seats. Veltar adjusted his breathing apparatus and looked across the vast circular room. Every seat was filled except one. The human seat had been empty for 50 years now, its surface covered in a thin layer of dust that no one had bothered to clean. Veltar called the meeting to order with 3 strikes of the ceremonial staff. The sound echoed through the chamber, but instead of the usual murmur of conversation dying down, the noise grew louder. Everyone was talking at once, voices rising in panic and anger. "The Kelter and Droxian fleets have engaged in open warfare," announced Commander Crinzel, his scales flashing red with agitation. 3 planets have already been bombarded. Civilian casualties are in the millions. Before anyone could respond, another representative stood up. "The Volan sector is experiencing mass starvation. 7 worlds are requesting emergency food supplies. But our distribution network has completely collapsed. The Verini plague has spread to 6 neighboring systems," shouted another voice from across the chamber. "We need medical teams immediately, but the Galactic Medical Initiative says they don't have the resources." Veltar struck the staff again, harder this time. The chamber finally fell silent. He looked around at the faces staring back at him. Fear, anger, confusion. In his 70 years of service to the Council, he had never seen such chaos. "One crisis at a time," Veltar said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Commander Crinzel, what happened with the Kelter-Droxian situation? We had monitoring stations along that border. How did this escalate without warning?" Crinzel's expression was grim. The monitoring stations filed reports, but no one was managing the diplomatic channels. The border disputes should have been handled through mediation, but there was no mediator assigned. "What do you mean, no mediator was assigned?" Veltar demanded. "We have an entire department for conflict prevention." "The department exists," said a smaller representative near the back, "but they only respond to formal requests." No one was doing the preventive work, the early conversations, the relationship building. That was always handled by ... The representative trailed off, glancing at the empty human seat. An uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. Veltar felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Pull up the conflict prevention records," he ordered. "Show me the last 50 years of activity." A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. The data streams showed a sharp spike of diplomatic interventions ending exactly 50 years ago. After that, the numbers dropped to nearly nothing. Hundreds of small disputes that would have been resolved quietly instead grew and multiplied. The current Kelter-Droxian War had started with a single trade disagreement 12 years ago. And the food distribution problem? Veltar asked, already dreading the answer. The logistics coordinator stood reluctantly. "Our current system was designed for efficiency. We ship food from surplus worlds to deficit worlds as needed. But the system keeps breaking down. Transport ships arrive late or at the wrong locations. Local distribution networks don't function properly. We're trying to fix it, but everything is so complicated." "Show me the old system," Veltar ordered. The hologram changed, displaying a vastly more complex network. Supply chains were interconnected, with multiple redundancies and local production support. Notes in the margins showed thousands of hours of coordination work, training programs for local farmers, sustainable development initiatives. The signature on most of these files read Human Agricultural Cores. "They weren't just shipping food," whispered the logistics coordinator. "They were teaching worlds how to feed themselves. They built entire systems that could run independently. When they left, they took all that knowledge with them." Veltar's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the staff. "And the medical crisis?" The medical director didn't bother standing. Her voice was hollow. The Galactic Medical Initiative was funded primarily through human contributions. They also provided 80% of our rapid response personnel. When they withdrew, we restructured to cut costs and improve efficiency. We eliminated the surplus supply stockpiles because they seemed wasteful. We reduced training programs because they were expensive. Now we have a plague outbreak and no way to respond effectively. Quinzel slammed his fist on his console. This is absurd. The humans were just one species among many. How could everything fall apart without them? Veltar looked at him with tired eyes. Because we never noticed what they were doing. Pull up the human withdrawal speech. The one from 50 years ago. The hologram shifted to show a recording. A human diplomat named Doyon stood at the human podium, his face calm and dignified. Veltar had been there that day. He remembered thinking the humans were being overdramatic, making a fuss about nothing. We have served this council for 200 years, Doyon's recorded voice said. In that time, we have provided humanitarian aid to thousands of worlds, mediated countless conflicts, and contributed to the development of species across the galaxy. We did this work not for recognition, but because we believed in the ideals this council claimed to represent. In the recording, several council members were clearly not paying attention. Some were looking at their personal displays. Quinzel's younger self was visibly smirking. However, Doyon continued, it has become clear that our contributions are neither valued nor wanted. When we propose new initiatives, we are dismissed as inexperienced. When we share concerns about policy directions, we are told to defer to the elder races. When we request basic considerations like labor rights for synthetic beings, we are mocked. Veltar remembered that moment. He had voted against the human proposal himself, thinking it was naive and unnecessary. Therefore, Doyon said, his voice steady, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We will honor all existing treaties with individual species who wish to maintain relations. But we will no longer participate in this body. We wish you wisdom and prosperity. Goodbye. The recording ended. The chamber was silent. We celebrated when they left, Veltar said quietly. I remember the discussions afterward. We talked about how we were finally free from their constant moralizing. How we could make decisions without the humans slowing everything down with their concerns about ethics and sustainability. He looked around the chamber. We never asked what they were actually doing. We saw them attending endless minor meetings and thought they were wasting time. We saw them maintaining relationships with smaller species and thought they were building a power base. We saw them running humanitarian programs and thought they were seeking glory. So what do? Asked someone from the back rows. Veltar stood up straighter. We do the work ourselves. We learn to manage our own civilization. We find mediators for the Kelter-Droxian conflict. We rebuild the food distribution networks. We respond to the medical crisis. And we do it without expecting the humans to come save us. Should we contact them? Quinzel asked. Request their assistance? Veltar looked at the empty seat one more time. Would you help us, if you were them? After 50 years of being proven right about everything they warned us about. No one answered. We fix this ourselves, Veltar said firmly. And maybe, in time, we become worthy of asking for their friendship again. Meeting adjourned. As the representatives filed out, Veltar remained in the chamber, staring at that empty seat and finally understanding what humanity had been trying to tell them all along. Ambassador, Hannah walked through the council archives, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. She had spent the last week here, preparing for what she knew would be her final presentation to the council. In her hands, she carried a datapad containing 200 years of human contribution records. She wondered if anyone would actually look at them. The presentation chamber was already half full when she arrived. That was a good sign, at least. She had worried that no one would show up at all. Hannah placed her datapad on the podium and waited for the rest of the council members to arrive. Veltar entered and gave her a respectful nod. He was one of the few who had always treated humans with dignity. Crinzel arrived shortly after, his scales gleaming in the artificial light. He didn't acknowledge Hana at all, speaking loudly to his companions about some military exercise. When everyone was seated, Hana began. "Thank you for coming. I've requested this session to present a comprehensive overview of human contributions to the Galactic Council over the past 2 centuries. I believe there are some misunderstandings about the scope of our involvement that need to be clarified." She activated the holographic display. Numbers and charts filled the air above the podium. In the past 50 years alone, human personnel have conducted humanitarian relief operations in 47 different star systems. These operations have provided food, medical care, and disaster relief to billions of individuals across multiple species. Crinzel made a dismissive gesture. "Many species conduct humanitarian work, Ambassador. This is nothing special." Hana nodded calmly. "You're correct. However, I wanted to ensure the scope was understood. Let me continue." She changed the display. Human mediators have been involved in the peaceful resolution of conflicts in 83% of all disputes settled in the last century. This includes border disagreements, trade conflicts, and cultural misunderstandings. The Council has professional mediators, another member called out. "Why should humans take credit for their work?" "The Council's official mediators handle formal disputes," Hana explained. "What I'm referring to is preventive diplomacy. The work that happens before conflicts become official problems. Small conversations, relationship building, early intervention. Human diplomat Saiho alone maintains regular communication with over 300 faction leaders across the galaxy." She could see confusion on some faces. They genuinely didn't understand what she was talking about. Hana pulled up another chart. The Galactic Medical Initiative receives 62% of its funding from human sources. Humans also comprise 80% of the rapid response medical teams. The reserve stockpiles of medicine and supplies that enable quick response to emergencies are maintained almost entirely by human logistics personnel. Because humans are wealthy and like to show off their generosity, Crinzel said with a sneer. "We understand charity, Ambassador." Hana felt a flash of anger, but kept her voice level. "It's not charity when the systems wouldn't function without it. Let me show you something else." The display changed to show a complex network of trade routes and supply chains. This is the current galactic logistics system. Food, medicine, raw materials, manufactured goods, all moving across thousands of light years. It looks efficient, doesn't it? Heads nodded around the chamber. This is what it actually looks like. Hana changed the image. The clean lines became a chaotic mess of connections, redundancies, and constant small adjustments. Thousands of human logistics coordinators work around the clock to keep this functioning. They handle the disruptions, reroute shipments, manage inventory, coordinate with local officials. Without this constant management, the entire system would collapse within weeks. "That's impossible," someone said. "The system is automated." "The system is automated within certain parameters," Hana corrected. "But reality is messy. Ships break down. Planets have unexpected crop failures. Natural disasters disrupt production. Pirates attack convoys. All of these require human judgment and quick decision-making. The computers can't handle it alone." She could see doubt on some faces now, but not understanding. "Not yet." Hana took a breath. 3 months ago, humanity submitted a proposal to establish basic rights for synthetic beings. Labor protections, legal recognition, freedom from abuse. Do you remember the response? Crinzel laughed. "That ridiculous proposal? Treating artificial constructs like living beings?" "Yes, I remember. It was absurd. You called it the delusions of a species barely off their homeworld, Hannah said quietly. In the official council record. Because it was delusional, Crinzal shot back. The elder races have thousands of years of experience. We know how the galaxy works. Humans have been spacefaring for barely 500 years, and in the council for only 200. Why should we take lectures from children? Hannah looked around the chamber. She saw agreement on many faces. These beings genuinely believed that age equaled wisdom, that their way was the only way. How many of you have actually visited Earth? She asked suddenly. A few hands raised. Maybe 10 out of the 60 present. How many of you have visited the human colonies? Fewer hands. How many of you know the names of any human council staff members besides myself and the other ambassadors? All the hands went down. That's what I thought, Hannah said softly. You don't know us. You don't see the work we do. You see humans at official functions and think that's all we are. You don't see the human nurse working 30-hour shifts during a plague outbreak. You don't see the human engineer fixing a failing water system on a world you've never heard of. You don't see the human teacher spending years helping a species develop their educational infrastructure. She pulled up one final image. It was a photograph of a human woman in medical gear, exhausted, sitting on the floor of a hospital on some distant world. This is Dr. Yuna. She's trained over 2,000 medical professionals from 15 different species. She works in the Outer Rim territories, places most of you have never been. When I asked her why she does it, do you know what she said? No one answered. She said because someone needs to, and she can help. That's all. No glory, no recognition, just helping because it needs to be done. Hannah closed the displays. Humanity is tired. We're tired of being dismissed. We're tired of having our concerns ignored. We're tired of being treated like naive children while we hold your civilization together behind the scenes. So we're done. The chamber erupted in noise. Questions, protests, accusations. Hannah waited for it to die down. We're not declaring war. We're not making threats. We're simply leaving. All human personnel will be withdrawn within 6 months. All humanitarian programs will be transferred to council management or shut down. All diplomatic channels will be closed except for direct species-to-species treaties. The human seat on this council will be permanently vacated. Veltar stood up. Ambassador Hannah, please. This is a drastic action. Surely we can discuss this, find a compromise. Hannah felt genuine sadness as she looked at him. He was a good person, one of the few who had tried to understand. Veltar, we've been discussing this for decades. Every proposal rejected. Every concern dismissed. Every warning ignored. There's nothing left to discuss? Good riddance, Crinzal said loudly. Let them leave. We don't need humans telling us how to run the galaxy. Several other council members voiced agreement. Hannah noticed Veltar's expression, the way his eyes moved from face to face, seeing the same dismissiveness she had faced for years. One more thing, Hannah said. In the files I'm leaving with the council, there are detailed instructions for maintaining all the systems human personnel currently manage. Logistics, medical response, diplomatic protocols, everything. I hope someone will actually read them. She picked up her datapad and walked toward the exit. At the door, she turned back one last time. We don't hate you, she said. We're just done carrying weight for people who won't acknowledge it exists. I hope you prove us wrong. I hope you build something better without us. But I don't think you will. 3 months later, Hannah stood on the transport ship and watched the council station shrink in the distance. Beside her, her colleague Minho shook his head sadly. Do you think they'll understand? He asked. Eventually, Hannah said. When everything starts falling apart. They'll understand then. Will it be too late? Hannah didn't answer. She didn't know the Volan sector stretched across 14 star systems, home to 23 inhabited worlds. For centuries, it had been a stable, productive region. Now, Administrator Phalenix stared at reports of mass starvation and wondered how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The first signs had been subtle. A few delayed shipments here and there. Some confusion about distribution schedules. Phalenix had ordered investigations, but his staff assured him these were normal fluctuations. The logistics network was automated and efficient. There was no cause for concern. Then the crop failures began. 3 agricultural worlds reported simultaneous blights affecting their primary food sources. It shouldn't have been a crisis. The Volan sector had always imported food from more productive systems to supplement local production. But when Phalenix requested emergency supplies, he discovered the import network had quietly collapsed. "What do you mean we can't get food shipments?" he demanded of his logistics coordinator. The coordinator pulled up a maze of shipping routes and schedules. "The supply chain is too complex. We need authorization from 7 different agencies just to request a shipment. Then we need to coordinate with the transport guilds, negotiate pricing, arrange customs clearances, verify quality standards. It's taking weeks to process each request." "It never took weeks before," Phalenix protested. "Before, the humans handled it," the coordinator admitted quietly. "They had people embedded in every part of the system. They knew who to contact, which forms to file, how to expedite urgent requests. They just made it work." Phalenix pulled up the historical records. For decades, human agricultural specialists had been stationed throughout the Volan sector. They had trained local farmers in sustainable techniques. They had helped worlds develop crop diversity. They had maintained seed banks and taught communities how to handle their own food security. All of that knowledge had left with the humans. Now, 3 worlds were starving, and Phalenix had no way to help them fast enough. 2 sectors away, Fleet Commander Xander surveyed the wreckage of the battle. The Kelter and Droxian fleets had torn each other apart in the space between their territories. Debris from destroyed ships drifted through the void. On the planets below, cities burned from orbital bombardment. Xander had been sent to mediate, to stop the fighting before it escalated further. He had arrived too late. The war had progressed too far, too fast. Both sides were now committed to total victory, and neither would accept peace terms. He reviewed the intelligence reports, trying to understand how a simple trade dispute had exploded into genocidal warfare. The timeline showed a steady escalation over 12 years. Small incidents that should have been resolved quietly instead festered and grew. Border skirmishes that should have triggered mediation instead led to reprisals. "Why didn't our early warning systems catch this?" Xander asked his intelligence officer. "They did, sir," the officer replied, showing him files full of reports and alerts. But there was no one assigned to act on them. The reports went into the system and stayed there. "What about our diplomatic corps?" "They respond to formal requests for mediation." No one filed a formal request until the shooting had already started. By then, it was too late. Xander found records of a human diplomat named Saiho, who had maintained regular contact with faction leaders throughout this region. Casual conversations, informal meetings, relationship building. Saiho had known these people personally. When tensions rose, he could make a quick call, arrange a quiet meeting, diffuse situations before they became official problems. When the humans left, that entire network vanished overnight. No one had realized it existed until it was gone. On the Varini homeworld, Medical Director Cora Shell watched her people die and felt completely helpless. The plague had appeared suddenly, a mutation of a common virus that turned deadly. It spread through the population faster than anyone could track. Within weeks, millions were sick. Within months, the death toll was climbing toward billions. The Galactic Medical Initiative had protocols for exactly this scenario. Rapid response teams should have arrived within days. Mobile hospitals should have been deployed. Quarantine procedures should have been implemented. Emergency vaccines should have been manufactured and distributed. None of that happened. We don't have the supplies, the GMI coordinator told her over the communication link. Our reserve stockpiles were eliminated 15 years ago. They were expensive to maintain, and the council wanted to cut costs. But there must be something, Corashell pleaded. Medical ships, trained personnel, anything. Our rapid response teams were mostly human personnel. When they withdrew, we restructured to reduce costs. We trained new people, but it takes years to build that kind of expertise. And we don't have years. Corashell found records of a human doctor named Una, who had spent 20 years in the Outer Rim, training medical professionals from a dozen species. Una's training programs had been comprehensive, covering everything from basic emergency response to complex epidemic management. But they had also been expensive and time-consuming. After the humans left, the Council had reviewed all programs for efficiency. Una's training was deemed too slow and too costly. They developed a new accelerated program that covered the basics in half the time. The new graduates were technically qualified, but they had no experience with real crisis. Now Corashell's people were dying, and the new doctors were overwhelmed, an unprepared dot in the council chambers. Veltar listened to report after report of failures cascading across the galaxy. The Volan starvation, the Kelter-Droxian War, the Verini plague, and dozens of smaller crises, all happening simultaneously. How did we not see this coming? Demanded one council member. Veltar pulled up Ambassador Hana's farewell presentation from 50 years ago. He had watched it 3 times now, seeing things he had missed before. She told us exactly what would happen, Veltar said. She showed us the systems that humans maintained. She explained how everything was interconnected. We didn't believe her. One species cannot be that important, Crinzel insisted. We are the elder races. We have been spacefaring for millennia. We don't need humans to tell us how to manage our affairs. Then why is everything falling apart? Veltar asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. Veltar continued, his voice heavy with regret. I've been reviewing the records. Do you know how many human personnel were working for the council when they withdrew? Over 200,000. Do you know what they were doing? Everything. Logistics, medical response, diplomatic outreach, humanitarian aid, infrastructure maintenance, educational programs. They were embedded in every system, every department, every function. Why didn't we know this? Someone asked. Because we didn't want to know, Veltar said. They were doing the work we considered beneath us. The tedious, unglamorous tasks that keep civilization running. We took credit for the successes and ignored the people who made them possible. He pulled up more records, showing the massive gap between human contributions and council recognition. Humans had funded and staffed programs across the galaxy, but council reports attributed successes to collective efforts or council initiatives. The humans had never corrected the record. They had just kept working. What do we do now? Asked the representative from Volan sector. Veltar looked at the reports of suffering spreading across the galaxy. We learned to do the work ourselves. We rebuild the systems we let collapse. We train people to handle the responsibilities we took for granted. And we hope it's not too late to save the lives depending on us. And the humans? Crinzal asked. Do we contact them? Request their help? Veltar thought about it carefully. If we ask them to come back now, what are we really asking? For them to fix our problems again? To enable us to continue ignoring the work that needs to be done? So we just let our people suffer? Another member protested. No, Veltar said firmly. We suffer with them. We do the work. We face the consequences of our choices. And maybe, if we succeed in building something better, we can approach humanity as equals, rather than as children begging their parents to come home. Across the galaxy, the unraveling continued. Systems that had functioned smoothly for generations sputtered and failed. The invisible infrastructure that humans had maintained became visible only through its absence. The Council scrambled to respond, learning hard lessons about the difference between authority and competence. And in human space, beyond their closed borders, humanity watched and waited. They had given the Council everything they had asked for: independence, freedom from human interference, the chance to prove their superiority. Now the Council would discover what that freedom actually cost. 5 years had passed since the crisis began. The Council chambers looked different now. Less formal, more functional. Representatives worked at their stations instead of simply attending ceremonial meetings. They had learned, slowly and painfully, that governance required actual work. Veltar had aged visibly in those 5 years. The stress of managing multiple crises while rebuilding broken systems had taken its toll. But there was something else in his expression now, something that hadn't been there before. Understanding, perhaps. Or humility. The Volan sector has stabilized, reported Administrator Phelenix. We've established local agricultural training programs on 8 worlds. Food production is improving, though it will take another decade to reach full self-sufficiency. We've also created a new logistics network that doesn't require constant manual intervention. It wasn't as efficient as the old human system, Phelenix admitted privately, but it was theirs, built with their own knowledge and effort. That mattered. The Kelter-Droxian War has ended, Fleet Commander Xander announced. Both sides agreed to a ceasefire after 47 months of fighting. The casualties were devastating. 3 planets rendered uninhabitable. Billions dead. But we've established a demilitarized zone and ongoing mediation protocols. The cost had been terrible, Xander knew. It could have been prevented with early intervention, with the kind of preventive diplomacy the humans had practiced. But the Council was learning. They had trained new mediators, who now maintained relationships across the galaxy. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. The Verini plague has been contained, Medical Director Cora Shell reported, her voice still heavy with grief. The death toll exceeded 2 billion. We've rebuilt the rapid response protocols and established new reserve stockpiles. We've also expanded medical training programs across all member species. 2 billion lives, Corashell thought. 2 billion who might have lived if the Council had maintained the systems the humans built. That guilt would never leave her. Veltar listened to each report and felt the weight of what they had lost. But he also saw what they had gained. The Council was learning to take responsibility. They were building genuine systems instead of relying on human labor they refused to acknowledge. We need to discuss the human question, Krinzel said. His scales were duller now, his voice less arrogant. The war he had failed to prevent had changed him. It's been 55 years since they withdrew. We've proven we can survive without them. But should we attempt to restore relations? The chamber was divided. Some wanted to move forward without humans, to prove the Council's independence. Others recognized that humanity's absence had cost the galaxy dearly. A few, like Veltar, understood that the question wasn't about need, but about justice. What would we offer them? Asked a representative. What could we possibly say that would make them want to return? Veltar had been thinking about this question for years. I don't think we should ask them to return. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But we should acknowledge what we took from them. The recognition we denied. The respect they deserved. We should apologize, not because we want something from them, but because it's right. Apologize? Krinzel said. To admit we were wrong? We were wrong, Veltar said simply. All of us? We built our civilization on their labor and dismissed them as inexperienced children. We owe them the truth. After hours of debate, the council agreed. They would send a delegation to human space, not to request assistance or negotiate terms, but to deliver a formal apology and acknowledgement. Veltar volunteered to lead the mission personally. The delegation consisted of 12 representatives from different species, each carrying gifts and messages. They approached the human border in an unarmed diplomatic vessel, broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. The human border station was surprisingly modest. Not a military fortress, just a simple way station marking the edge of human territory. A single human officer appeared on their communication screen, her uniform neat and her expression professional. This is Officer Ji Wu of the Terran Border Service, she said. How can I help you? Veltar was struck by her calm demeanor. No hostility, no suspicion, just polite efficiency. I am Veltar, Speaker of the Galactic Council. We request permission to deliver a formal message to human leadership. One moment, please. Ji Wu consulted something off-screen, then nodded. Permission granted. You may dock at Port 7. Someone will meet you there. The delegation docked and was escorted to a conference room. It was comfortable, but not luxurious, with simple furniture and large windows showing the stars beyond. They waited for an hour before anyone arrived. When the door finally opened, Veltar recognized the man who entered. Dayan, the diplomat who had delivered humanity's withdrawal speech 55 years ago. He was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with age. But his eyes were still sharp and kind. Council Speaker Veltar, Dayan said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. It's been a long time. Please sit. Veltar took the offered hand, noting the strength in Dayan's grip despite his age. Dayan, thank you for seeing us. Of course, Dayan said. Though I should tell you, I'm retired from diplomatic service. I'm just an advisor now. But when I heard the council was coming, I wanted to be here. The delegation presented their gifts, elaborate tokens of respect from each species. Dayan accepted them graciously, but Veltar could see these material offerings meant little to him. We came to apologize, Veltar said finally. For 55 years ago, and for the 2 centuries before that. We were wrong. About everything? Dayan was quiet for a long moment. Tell me what changed. So Veltar told him. About the crisis that had devastated the galaxy. About the millions who had died. About the painful process of learning to manage systems they had taken for granted. About the records they had reviewed, finally seeing the full scope of human contributions. We built our civilization on your labor, Veltar said, his voice breaking slightly. And we never acknowledged it. We dismissed you as children, while you held everything together. The apology seems inadequate, but it's all we have. Dayan listened without interrupting. When Veltar finished, he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Do you know what hurt most? Dayan asked quietly. It wasn't the dismissal or the mockery. It was the invisibility. We spent 200 years working beside you, and you never really saw us. You saw what you wanted to see, naive young species playing at importance. You never saw the nurse working through exhaustion, or the teacher spending decades on a forgotten world, or the mediator having the same conversation for the 100th time because it needed to be done. He turned back to face them. We didn't leave because we were angry. We left because staying had become unhealthy. We were enabling your dysfunction, preventing you from learning to take responsibility for yourselves. We understand that now, Veltar said. We're learning. Slowly, painfully, but we're learning. Good, Dayan said simply. That's good. Will humanity consider returning to the council? Asked one of the other delegates. Doyan shook his head gently. No, we've moved on. We've built something different out here. A coalition with other species, the ones the council overlooked or dismissed. Younger races, synthetic beings, species from the outer regions. We're building something more equitable, where everyone's contributions are recognized. So this is permanent, Veltar said. It wasn't a question. For now, yes, Doyan replied. Perhaps in a few generations, when your children have learned to build something truly fair, we could talk about partnership. Real partnership, between equals. But that's years away. Maybe decades. He smiled, and Veltar saw no malice in it, only gentle firmness. You taught us an important lesson, you know. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is step back and let others face the consequences of their choices. We're doing that now. The delegation stayed for 3 days, sharing meals and conversation with various human officials. They learned about the new coalition humanity had built, a more collaborative model that shared resources and responsibilities more equitably. On the last day, as they prepared to leave, Doyan walked Veltar to the docking bay. I hope you succeed, Doyan said sincerely. I hope you build something better than what you had. The galaxy needs a functioning council, even if that council doesn't include humanity. Veltar asked. Especially then, Doyan replied. You need to prove you can do it yourselves. Not for us, but for you. As the council ship departed, Veltar watched the human station disappear in the distance. They had come seeking reconciliation and left with something more valuable, the understanding that some bridges, once burned, needed time to rebuild. And that was okay. The galaxy would continue. The council would keep learning. And humanity would keep building something new. Maybe someday their paths would cross again, as true partners rather than unequal participants. But that day was far in the future, and it would have to be earned. 10 years after the delegation's visit to human space, the council chambers buzzed with quiet activity. Representatives worked at their stations, managing the endless tasks of galactic governance. The atmosphere was different now, less about ceremony and more about function. They had learned that civilization required constant attention, not just grand speeches. Veltar reviewed the latest reports with satisfaction, tinged with sadness. The Volan sector was now completely self-sufficient in food production. New agricultural academies had been established on 15 worlds, teaching the sustainable farming techniques that humans had once tried to share. The death from starvation had finally stopped 3 years ago, but the memory of those who had died still haunted him. The Kelter and Droxian peoples had signed a permanent peace treaty. The demilitarized zone between their territories had become a shared economic zone, with both species working together on reconstruction projects. It had taken 12 years and cost billions of lives, but they had finally learned to talk instead of fight. Young mediators from both species trained together now, learning the preventive diplomacy that could have saved their worlds. The Verini had rebuilt their civilization, though their population was still recovering from the plague that had killed 2 billion. The new Galactic Medical Initiative was properly funded and staffed, with reserve stockpiles and rapid response teams ready for the next crisis. The cost of that lesson had been paid in lives that could never be returned. We've received a request from the Outer Rim territories, announced a junior representative. They're dealing with a food distribution problem and asking for our assistance. Veltar felt a flash of the old panic, the memory of crises they couldn't handle. But then he looked at the logistics team working at their stations. They were competent now, trained through years of hard experience. Send a team, he ordered, and make sure they bring training materials. We're not just solving the immediate problem. We're teaching them to solve future problems themselves. That was the key lesson he had learned. Helping meant empowering, not creating dependency. Across the galaxy, in human space, Doyun sat in a garden on a human colony world and watched children playing. They were human children alongside young beings from a dozen other species, all laughing together without understanding the complex politics that had shaped their parents' lives. Still thinking about the council? Asked a voice beside him. Doyan turned to see his old colleague Hana, now retired like him. They met regularly now, two old diplomats sharing memories and watching the younger generation build something new. Always, Doyan admitted, wondering if we did the right thing, if leaving was truly the answer. We gave them what they needed, Hana said. Space to grow, consequences to learn from. They're better now than they were. Still flawed, still struggling, but better. And us? Doyan asked. Are we better? Hana smiled. Look around. We built this. A coalition where everyone contributes and everyone is recognized. Where synthetic beings have the same rights as organic ones. Where younger species aren't dismissed because of their age. We couldn't have built this while we were still in the council, carrying their weight. The human coalition had indeed grown into something remarkable. 23 species now participated, including several synthetic races who had been created by the elder races and then abandoned. The structure was different from the council, more democratic and more transparent. Decisions were made collectively, with no species claiming superiority based on age or history. Resources were shared according to need and ability. Educational programs were mutual, with each species teaching and learning from the others. The humans provided their expertise in logistics, medicine, and diplomacy, but so did everyone else. It was messy and sometimes inefficient, but it was fair. Have you heard the latest from the council? Hana asked. Doyan nodded. They're implementing new policies for younger species, giving them more voting power, more recognition. Veltar has been pushing for reforms. He learned, Hana said softly. Not all of them did, but he did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play. This was the future they had fought for. Not revenge against the council, not isolation from the galaxy, but the freedom to build something better. The crisis came suddenly, as they always did. An unknown force appeared at the edge of explored space, not from any known direction. Ships without identification, technology unlike anything in the databases, and clear hostile intent. The first contact was violent. A council border station was destroyed with all hands, and a human colony went silent. Within days, both the council and the human coalition realized they faced a common threat. Veltar stared at the tactical display, showing the unknown fleet's movements. They were methodical, testing defenses and gathering information. This wasn't a random attack. It was the beginning of an invasion. We need to contact the humans, Krinzal said. His military experience made him the first to grasp the scale of the threat. Our forces alone won't be enough. Will they help us? Asked another council member. After everything? Veltar thought about Doyan's words from 10 years ago. Sometimes the most helpful thing was to step back and let others face consequences. But this wasn't a consequence of council policies. This was an external threat that endangered everyone. Send a message, Veltar ordered. Full transparency about the threat. Request a joint meeting to coordinate defense. And make it clear we're asking as partners, not as superiors seeking assistance. The response from human space came within hours. They would meet. The conference was held on a neutral station between council and human territory. Veltar led the council delegation. Doyan represented humanity, brought out of retirement because his experience was needed. They met in the same kind of simple conference room where they had last spoken. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Not supplicants and judges, but equals facing a shared problem. Show us what you know, Doyan said without preamble. Veltar displayed all the intelligence they had gathered. Ship movements, weapon capabilities, estimated fleet size. The humans contributed their own data, and together they built a more complete picture of the threat. They're probing for weaknesses, said a human military advisor named Taijin. Testing response times, analyzing defensive capabilities. This is reconnaissance for a larger invasion. Our forces are scattered, Krinzal admitted. We've been focused on rebuilding after our internal conflicts. We're not prepared for a major war. Neither are we, Taijin replied. The coalition is strong, but we're young and still building our military infrastructure. Separately, we'll both fall. Together, we have a chance. Over 3 days, they planned. Council forces would hold the forward positions, using their heavy ships and established defensive networks. Human coalition forces would provide rapid response, utilizing their superior logistics and coordination. Information would be shared in real time. With joint command centers coordinating the defense. It was uncomfortable for many council species, working as equals with those they had once dismissed. But necessity was a powerful teacher. The battle, when it came, was brutal. The unknown force hit hard, trying to divide the defenders and conquer each group separately. But the combined forces held. Council ships absorbed the heavy attacks, while human squadrons struck at vulnerable points. Coordination that had been impossible 60 years ago now flowed smoothly, each side trusting the other to fulfill their role. After 3 weeks of fighting, the unknown force withdrew. They had been testing the defenses and found them stronger than expected. They would be back, everyone knew, but for now the immediate threat had passed. In the aftermath, Veltar and Doyan met one final time before returning to their respective territories. Thank you, Veltar said, for helping despite everything. Doyan shook his head. We didn't help you. We helped defend the galaxy. There's a difference, is there? Veltar asked. Yes, Doyan said firmly. If we had returned because you couldn't manage without us, we would have just enabled the same problems. But this threat endangered everyone, including us. We acted in mutual interest, as partners. That's different from being your safety net. Veltar understood. Will this change anything? Between the Council and humanity? Maybe, Doyan said. We've proven we can work together as equals. We can coordinate on mutual threats. But partnership isn't the same as membership. We're still not rejoining the Council. I understand, Veltar said. And he did. Though, Doyan added with a slight smile, we've been discussing establishing formal diplomatic relations. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, military cooperation on external threats. Separate civilizations working together when it makes sense. That would be welcome, Veltar said sincerely. As the Council delegation prepared to depart. A young Council representative approached Doyan nervously. Sir, the young representative said, I wanted to thank you for everything humanity did, even when we didn't appreciate it. I'm part of the new generation. We've been learning the real history, not just the official version. We know what you contributed and what it cost you. Doyan smiled warmly. Then learn from it. Build something better than your parents did. Recognize the people doing the unsexy, unglamorous work that keeps civilization running. Don't take anyone for granted. We won't, the young representative promised. Watching the exchange, Veltar felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope that the galaxy would never return to what it was. The Council would never again be the single dominant power, and humanity would never rejoin. But maybe that was good. Maybe they were all building something better. The Council was learning responsibility and humility. Humanity was building a more equitable coalition. And between them, they could face external threats as partners. Years from now, perhaps their children would build something even better. A galaxy where no one's contributions went unrecognized, where younger voices were heard alongside older ones, where helping meant empowering rather than creating dependency. Doyan returned to his garden and watched the children play. Human and non-human, young beings who would inherit a complicated galaxy, but also one with more possibilities than the previous generation had known. Hana joined him again, as she often did. So we helped them after all. We worked together, Doyan corrected. As equals. That's different. Is it enough? Hana asked. After everything that happened? Doyan thought about the 2 billion Virini who had died, the billions lost in the Kelter-Droxian War, the millions who had starved in the Volan sector. All the consequences of lessons learned too late. No, he said honestly. It will never be enough to balance those losses. But it's something. They're growing. We're growing. The galaxy is messy and broken and beautiful. And maybe that's how it should be. Hana nodded. They sat together in the garden, 2 old diplomats who had helped reshape the galaxy by walking away from it, watching the children who would inherit what they had built. The council's chamber still had humanity's empty seat, maintained now not as a forgotten relic, but as a memorial, a reminder of the price of arrogance and the value of recognizing those who serve without seeking glory. Some lessons could only be learned through loss, but at least these lessons were finally learned, and somewhere in the space between Council territory and human coalition space, on a dozen neutral stations and trading posts, beings from both civilizations met and worked together, building bridges one conversation at a time. The galaxy continued turning, broken but healing, divided but learning, complicated but full of hope.